Hello and welcome to Cryptid by State, Michigan. Here we are at the beginning of another month, and with that comes the 6th entry in the Cryptid by State series. After Michigan, we have 4 states that are tied with the number of votes. They are Arizona, Texas, Ohio, and Kentucky. I was planning on making videos of them in that order, but I am opening it to another vote. I want to keep the voting period short, so things don't get confusing. In saying that, I will be taking the tally on Saturday, and I will probably release the results in next week's video. If this is successful, then I will do this again with other tied states. On a personal note, as many of you are aware, I live in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and being yesterday was Groundhog Day, I realized something. Since it is that one time a year that our little town sees guests from all over, I wondered if some of the visitors may have been a few of my subscribers. If a few of you did make the trip, first, welcome to Punxsy, and second, most people who live here don't leave their homes on that day. I follow this tradition as well, and while I'd love to meet each and every one of you, the chances of that randomly happening on Groundhog Day is pretty slim. Outside of going to Sheetz, which is near my house, I normally don't head out. Although, I doubt many people would travel to Punxsy to see me. So, today we need to get our luggage packed, grab some snacks for our journey, and be ready for our long road trip from California to Michigan. Michigan has quite a diverse story throughout history, and played an important role in the Revolutionary War. Originally the land was occupied by 3 Algonquin tribes, the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi, who worked together under the confederation known as the Council of Three Fires. French explorers came to the area in 1622, but didn't set up settlements until 1668. It was said that the council and the settlers got along with very little hostility. In saying that, in the 1660s, Michigan became part of what was known as New France, which was obviously under French rule. Then in 1774, with the Quebec Act, Michigan was made a province of Quebec, which was controlled by the British. In 1813, America defeated the British during the Battle of Lake Erie and claimed a portion of Michigan. A peace treaty was signed between the Americans and the British after the Battle of the Thames, and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan came under American rule. Then on January 26, 1837, Michigan officially became the 26th state. The reason behind Michigan being called that is somewhat debated, but most say it came from the Chippewa word Michigama, which means large lake. Yet to be clear, some say it came from the word Magigan, which meant large clearing. Early explorers heard one of those two words and called it Michigan in the 1670s. Michigan has many nicknames such as the Water Wonderland, Great Lakes State, and the Wolverine State. Most of these can be attributed to it being surrounded by 4 of the 5 Great Lakes. But what about the Wolverine one? While wolverines have been spotted in the Upper Peninsula, the name is said to come from the Ohioans during the Toledo War, where they called the Michigan people vicious and bloodthirsty, like a wolverine. Although another story basically states the same thing, but it was given to the settlers by the Native American tribes due to how ravenously they took the land. They likened it to a wolverine's gluttonous behavior when looking for food. As always, I like to talk about the flags of states before moving to the cryptids. On it there are 3 animals on a blue background, with the bald eagle representing the United States, the elk on the left and moose on the right were said to be taken from the Hudson Bay Company coat of arms, and they supported a shield that has a man holding a rifle while standing on the peninsula. There are many Latin phrases with e pluribus unum at the top, meaning one out of many, and tubor on the shield, meaning I will defend. At the bottom is, and I'm going to try my best here, Si quaeris peninsulam omanum circumspice, which means if you seek a pleasant peninsula, look about you. The flag was officially recognized in 1911. I was a little worried when I first started looking into cryptids for Michigan, since I kept running across the same 3 that many of us are all familiar with, which would be Bigfoot, the Dogmen, and melonheads. I certainly didn't want to make a video about any of those 3, since I already talked about dogmen in their own video, and Bigfoot sightings are pretty much in every state. When it comes to melonheads, I know a few of you have asked me to talk about them, but I choose not to. This is due to me personally believing that they aren't cryptids, but rather humans with deformities. Even if the stories are true and they are the result of inbreeding, it seems a bit cruel to view the children as monsters or creatures. Even if the stories state they are cannibals and killers, it still doesn't make them cryptids. But not to worry, I am not letting you down, since I was able to uncover quite a few really strange, true cryptids. Our first cryptid today is in really odd territory, since it's a merman. According to the stories, on May 3rd or 13th, depending on your source, of 1782, a Canadian fur trapper named Venant St. Germain and his crew were traveling to Thunder Bay by canoe, but stopped for the night on Pie Island. The next morning, Germain got up early to do some fishing from the shore. As he looked out on Lake Superior, he noticed something odd swimming in the water about 67 yards out. He saw a 3-foot-long childlike person with woolly hair, brown skin, and brilliant eyes gliding in the water. It was said to have a human torso and a fish tail. It had 6 fingers and a very rounded head. Germain called out for his fellow travelers, and many of them saw the being as well. Venant then ran for his rifle and pointed it at the creature. Before he could pull the trigger, an Ojibwa woman he had as a guide stopped him, saying that it would be bad luck to threaten the water gods. She stated that in him even aiming the gun would probably bring a terrible storm. During this whole event, the being vanished underwater and never appeared again. At 11 o'clock that night, the warnings came true, and the company was hit with a storm that was so strong that left them immobilized for 3 days. While many people may question what they saw that day, Saint Germain believed it enough that he even signed an affidavit before the Court of King's Bench of Montreal, swearing to his encounter many years later. Going a step farther, the Ojibwa tribe actually has stories and legends about a creature that looked very similar to what Germain saw, with the only difference being their version has dark hair all over its body, and it's called Memegwashi. In those stories, the creatures don't have noses and make their homes in cascades. They hide amongst rock faces and prefer to stay in areas where they can escape quickly. While all this may seem made for the realm of fantasy, it is worth noting that many cultures have stories about beings very similar to this. In the 1870s, 3 fishermen reported seeing a blonde mermaid with brown-colored skin in the waters around Point Grey, which is off the coast of Vancouver. In the waterway called Active Pass in British Columbia, another sighting of a merperson occurred in 1967. A ferry was traveling in the area full of passengers, and many claimed to see a blonde-haired mermaid eating a salmon while sitting on a rock. I should note that mermaid festivals are held each year in different locations around Michigan. Keeping with water cryptids, this video wouldn't be complete without noting how many lake monsters there are. There is the Lilanu lake monster, which is said to have a long stump-like neck, an extremely long tail, and abnormally large eyes. It makes its home in the freshwater lakes and swamps, and appeared after the dam was constructed to provide water for the lumber mill. Many believe in creating the dam, it trapped the creature from being able to leave the lake. It is said to extend its head above the water, appearing to be a log, and when someone draws too near, it opens its massive eye and shoots under the water. Lake Erie has a lake serpent that I have talked about before briefly, named Bessie. This creature has been spotted since 1793 and is described as being a large silver or gray color and is more snake-like than a typical lake monster. As usual, I want to talk about a more lesser-known creature, which is called Mishibiju, or Great Lynx, to the Ojibwa tribe. This being is believed to be one of the most powerful water-dwelling creatures in Native American lore. As of such, it is said to be able to control all aquatic life, including snakes. It is described as having the head of a cat, which is adorned with long horns, sometimes made of copper. Its feet are like the paws of a cat, its skin is covered in scales, and it has razor-sharp spines running down its back. This creature is said to be a protector of its area, and many state it guards copper deposits as well. It really isn't something to mess with, since it can turn into any shape it wishes, can cause thunderstorms, whirlpools, and will grab unwary travelers from the banks of the water, dragging them down to make a meal of them. It is said to make its home in Lake Huron. Some have claimed that settlers in the area saw this creature as well, but named it Cressy. The only issue with that is Pressy is said to live in Lake Superior. I guess underwater cave systems could exist so the creature could traverse lakes. Pressy is said to be about 75 feet long, have dark green scales, a horse-like head, and a tail like a whale. It has been sighted for many years, in fact more so than most cryptids. This creature isn't friendly either, since many of the encounters involve an attack. In 1897, a man from Detroit and 3 friends were out on his boat fishing when he fell overboard. Originally he thought his boat struck a rock, but as he flailed in the water, he felt a serpent-like body grab a hold of him and start to constrict. His friends saw what was happening and managed to fight off the creature and save their friend's life. Sightings continued pretty regularly, but one interesting encounter occurred in the 1990s. 3 fishermen were watching a deer swimming in the water while trying to get to the shore. Before it could do so, the men saw a strange creature grab the deer, and it did so with enough force that the only thing that remained was a severed head. Moving on to something more terrestrial but equally odd, we find something that seems like it belongs in folktales. I'm sure a lot of Detroit natives will be happy that I am talking about the Nain Rouge. This creature is said to appear like what most demons are characteristically depicted as. It is said to be about the size of a small child, has red skin, sharp teeth set in a mouth that is always grinning, its eyes can be fiery red or luminescent like a mirror, and some describe it with horns and even black fur on the body. As I mentioned, it looks exactly like what most people think of when talking about demons. While it can be scary in appearance, there only has been 2 reports of it attacking anyone, and that was in 1884 and then again in 1964. I couldn't find any details behind that other than in the first attack it was described as being a baboon with horns and restless red eyes. Outside of that, this being seems to follow the Mothman pattern, where whenever it shows up, bad things happen. It was said to appear on July 30th, 1763, before the Battle of Bloody Run, where 58 British soldiers were killed by Chief Pontiac. The Nain Rouge then was said to dance among the bodies until the Detroit River turned red from the blood. Then the creature appeared again just days before the Great Fire of 1805, which caused most of Detroit to be caught on fire. The result of the War of 1812 was attributed to this creature's appearance as well, since General William Hull mentioned being attacked by the demon from the fog. Not long after, he surrendered. In 1967, 2 utility workers saw a creature of this description climbing one of the poles just before the start to the 1967 Detroit riots. It then showed up again in 1976 before a massive snowstorm that hit the area. But you may ask, what history does this being have? According to experts, this creature emerged from a mix of French and Native American legends about a type of hobgoblin. The Native American lore sees it as the child of the stone god. The French version is based off the Norman stories of a being known as Luton, which looks like a gnome. Since 2011, a parade called Marche des Nains Rouges is held to symbolize chasing the entity out of town. However, other groups joined, stating the creature isn't to be blamed for any of the bad events. The whole thing is good-natured, and from what I can tell is good for the community. As usual, I couldn't include every cryptid that is said to roam about the state, but I do like to include them as snippets in my honorable mention section. The first of which would be a giant white wolf that is famous in Native American lore and is said to be the cause of death to some Michigan explorers, and it is known as the Wahila. And looking at this cryptid, which basically is a living direwolf, it shares many stories with the Alaska area, but it is said to make its home in the Nahanni National Park in Canada. I think I will be talking more about this in an upcoming cryptid spotlight. Another cryptid worth mentioning is the Dewey Lake Monster. This is a fascinating one, since it has a lot of credibility to it, but descriptions vary, from it being a Bigfoot to it appearing like a creature from the Black Lagoon. There are some interesting encounters that I do want to tell you about one day. As usual, I like to add some funny ones as well, and that would be a giant green squirrel of Amble in Montcalm County. In this very small town, a squirrel the size of a cow with green fur and various colored eyes is said to roam about at night. Its chirps and other sounds echo through the valley, just as the moon is only the size of a sliver. Most people are sure this is just an old legend, or from the imagination of people who have had too much to drink, but who knows. I did make a video about a ghost cow who turned out to be true. So as always, I'm curious as to your thoughts about these cryptids, and do keep in mind these videos are not intended to cover all cryptids, so some did get left out. I do hope you enjoyed it, and please remember to vote for which of the 4 states we should visit next. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you could share my videos with someone you know who may be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.